We meet the new state GOP chairperson tonight.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
So amidst, I wouldn't say turbulence, but a little bit of competitive stuff, we have a new GOP chairperson, Cienki, and you're going to meet her coming up in a couple of moments. So a little bit of post-game drama, but more importantly, I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to talk about the structure of the GOP, how they're putting their strategies together, what impact they could possibly have on what has been a Democratic dominance in the state. Of course, Democrats in the state are pretty much split right now in terms of their own philosophy. So is there fertile ground for the Republicans to make up some, I don't know, momentum and traction? We'll talk about it. Great to have you in. Thank you very much for tuning in on the Thursday edition. In the meantime, let's check a local story that the chairperson might have a thought about. This is about our infrastructure and a new way of doing business, which is very much like the old way.
Every local driver knows the Providence Viaduct. It's the collection of bridges that carries I-95 past the Providence Place Mall. State leaders have been concerned about its condition for years. Now Governor Gina Raimondo's administration says the northbound side is, quote, dangerous and crumbling. But her team also says there is not enough money in her 10-year roadworks infrastructure program to finish the project, partly because the price tag has more than doubled. In 2016, the Rhode Island Department of Transportation estimated the cost of repairing the northbound viaduct at $110 million. Today, the agency estimates the cost at $250 million. A RIDOT spokesperson sent this illustration to show why that number jumped. They now plan to not only replace the main bridge, but also change traffic patterns around it. And the agency has come up with a new plan to cover the cost by borrowing $200 million and paying it back over time with money Congress sends Rhode Island for highway construction. It's unclear whether state lawmakers will agree to the new plan. A Senate committee is scheduled to take it up on Thursday.
You know, I once joked in front of a group of civil engineers that, and this was not very well received, I can promise you, but I joked that somebody must have been drunk when they actually designed the 146-95 split, because it is like, it's like, you know, all the way up, and it jams up downtown from 2 o'clock in the afternoon, probably to 6, 7 o'clock at night. And I'm hoping that this project is going to relieve some of that. I'm not exactly sure if it does. The idea, though, that we're Garvey funding, meaning borrowing against money that's going to come in, is actually the old way the DOT used to do business on a regular basis, to the tune of near billions of dollars on an annual fiscal basis. This is not good news. Roadworks has gotten kind of loose. We don't know exactly when these tolls are supposed to come in. They've won one hurdle in federal court in defense of a lawsuit from the truckers. I wouldn't say DOT's off the rails, but the wheels are wobbling a little bit here. And interesting, the Speaker of the House, fellow Democrat, Nick Mattiello, says they're going to have to sell this idea. Now, it's hard to be a fiscal disciplinarian from the House side when the highway is crumbling. I mean, the highway's got to get done. So a couple $250 million is going to have to come from somewhere. I don't know. It's as much as things change, they just seem to remain the same around here. We have a new GOP chair. Let's spend some time on this and give Cienki some real running room here, because we've got all sorts of things we should be talking about. Welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You have a thought on that, by the way? I didn't bring you here specifically for that, but you're going to have thoughts on everything.
Sure. Yes, the roads need to be done. You know, I always laugh with my family members when I say I live in Rhode Island, and they come up to visit, and they say, Rhode Island, that's an accurate description of how bad your roads are here. So you're right, we have to invest in our infrastructure, but how you fund it is it could be detrimental to the taxpayers. You're absolutely right. The revenue hasn't come in to Rhode Island yet, and yet we have this expectation that it will be here.
Well, there's a system in place. This Garvey funding is built for that specific, you know, for lack of a better term, guaranteed cash flow from the feds. But we were always chasing our tail.
Right.
And so it looks like we have to do some tail chasing in order to be able to get this part of the project done.
Right. So it's a great place. I agree with the speaker on this. This is going to have to be strategically looked at, how we are going to pay for this. So here's an instance where I absolutely agree with the Democrats when they talk about how we're going to do this. We have to start looking at taking care of taxpayer dollars.
The House Democrats you're speaking about.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because the tent is so big for Democrats, it's pretty hard to speak about them on a monolithic basis, right? I mean, you've got a progressive movement now, you've got the speaker who more than not doesn't buy the Governor's Act, you got a Senate president who's somewhat rivalrous with the House Speaker, kind of leans toward the governor's side on more things than not. It's an interesting dynamic over there. What is your perspective on that whole thing?
So what is my perspective? Lately what has happened, and we saw it in the 2018 election, is that a lot of progressives were elected to the House. So they're pulling the Democrats towards the left. So what I call the Kennedy-esque Democrats, the conservative Democrats, are kind of being left behind. So I believe it's a wonderful opportunity for the Republicans to come in and say, come over to our side. Come the independents, the conservative Democrats, and the regular Republicans. Let's work together to try to effectuate change in Rhode Island.
Okay, let's talk about, we'll get to some of the issues of the day. Let's talk about your election. You did not win on the first ballot last weekend, but you won strong enough to be able to have two competitors fold in behind you. In fact, it was kind of an agreement. I would use the old term gentleman's agreement, but that certainly doesn't apply, right? It was a participants agreement sponsored by the House and Senate elected Republicans. What was that all about?
So we met with all the candidates met with the legislative leaders and talked about what our vision was and what our plan was moving forward. And we're going to have a meeting that they weren't going to endorse one of the candidates, but out of that meeting it came that they were going to endorse three of us with the expectation that we would work together. And we all bought into that because prior to that meeting, we had been spending a lot of time together, going from city, town, and all the committees throughout the state. And we all agreed that no matter who won, that we would all help each other out, because it was all about party unity. We all had strengths and weaknesses, and we readily recognized that in each other. So we said, it would be tremendous if we all backed whoever won and we moved this party forward.
Right.
So that was what we were going to do.
Three of the four candidates who remained for that Saturday vote had that concept.
Yes.
Ms. Schiff, who finished second to you, was not in that group, but she ended up actually falling into that decision. Reportedly, after a meeting with Mayor Ellen Fung, she and you in the back of the room. Was this a broker deal in the middle of the day?
Well, it was actually when I went to the meeting, the delegate meeting on that Saturday, I approached Rebecca immediately before anything had occurred, and I said, listen, if you win, just tell me what you want me to do. I will fully support your candidacy. And she said likewise to me. So before the voting even started, we had already agreed that we would work together. And then after the first ballot, she came up to me and I said, where can we place you? What would you like to do? Because I'll fully support that. So we came to that conclusion right away when we left that room that day.
So where are you going to place her?
So she would actually like to work on the national level. She would actually like to help with the President Trump's campaign. So I would fully support her ability. She's smart, she's articulate, very impressed with every candidate.
President Trump's campaign
for re-election.
I get that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Really?
Yeah.
President Trump.
I think he's announced.
President Trump's campaign, as it is a component of the state Republican Party's official capacity?
No, not at all. But to work with him in whatever capacity that they see fit. She said, I would love to be at that level.
What does that have to do with you?
Not really anything.
So that's not a brokered deal inside the confines of the committee or the state Republican Party.
Well, I would guess that it would be something that the state party chair would maybe recommend somebody. to work at that level. And I would have no problem recommending her. Again, she is very smart, very articulate. I've really enjoyed getting to know these other candidates.
Okay, so we'll get back to the Trump impact on the state Republican Party. But what's fascinating to me is that one of the candidates, Michael Very, said in our radio discussion last week that he had agreed with you that if he had won, that he would point to you as the next executive director on a new paid model. You blew his doors off. What was that conversation? I mean, what was that fantasy about?
Well, I don't think it was a fantasy. You know, unfortunate for Mike that he had a military obligation. So the last 2 weeks of an election, which are really, you gear up, you see more state central delegates.
A lot of phone calls and conversations.
A lot of phone calls, a lot of conversations. And unfortunately, because of his military obligation, he wasn't around. And I became more visible. So more people got to meet me. But I have the utmost respect for Mike. I think he is young, he's articulate, he's got a great skill set, and we are going to work together. In fact, I have asked him to chair the candidate recruitment, and he has readily agreed, and he has hit the ground running. He is pulling together data for me, he's talking to people, and he will be out there and visible.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about a little bit of the post-game drama, if you will, and the new structure of the Republican Party, if there will be one. Stay with us. So there's always got to be something, right? There's always got to be something. You can't have a clean election to lead the Republican Party, because maybe it's because there's not enough room in the phone booth that it gets a little claustrophobic in there. Everyone's got to throw their elbows around. But Barbara Ann Fenton, the spouse of Mayor Alan Fung, the two-time nominee from the Republicans for governor, left the Republican Central Committee after your election, suggesting, well, here's her tweets. Her first tweet is, I'll surmise, I don't like what Cienki has had to say about firefighters, and I'm a firefighter kid, and I'm taking my ball and bat and going home. And then when asked by Kathy Gregg of the Providence Journal what the mayor's and the nominee's position was on this, she's like, oh, he's with me, but, you know, I told him to stick around, more or less. Which I think, frankly, might just end Alan Fung's political career. But anyway, what happened?
I don't know. I don't. It's just disappointing. Barbara Ann sent me a letter of resignation from the State Central Committee, and I'm just disappointed.
Did you have a conversation with her?
No, no.
Did you have a conversation with Alan Fung when he drew you and Ms. Schiff together just to kind of work out the leadership thing?
We just.
Did he give you any indication
No.
that he had turbulence in his own house, so to speak?
No.
Nothing?
No.
Has anyone talked to you since this story came out early this week
No.
about this?
No.
Have you pursued them to say, what's the matter?
Actually, Dan, as you know, when you get elected to this position, I have spent the past couple of days going from media outlet to media outlet. I don't even know what my children look like anymore. So I haven't had time to actually come up to breathe yet. I'm trying to put together the organizational strategy and the organization for the Rhode Island State Republican Party. Maybe next week I can actually take a deep breath, but right now I have hit the ground running and trying to get the job done.
Well, it seems her arguments stem from what is no doubt a contentious relationship that the Town of East Greenwich Council, which you led
Yes.
prior to being exited by the voters, you and every other Republican, right, down there. There was a pretty contentious relationship between you and the Firefighters Union. There was some stuff that we have chronicled here with the firefighters that moved in from Coventry to East Greenwich. There was I think, well-organized election effort by the firefighters to put Democrats on the council, and it succeeded. You and Gail Corrigan, the town administrator, or town manager, seemed to be of the same mind, right, when it came to the fiscal issues and some of the issues with the firefighters. And there was strong words, it seems, both publicly and privately. You're accused in a lawsuit of saying some pretty locker room things to a firefighter, including, I will paraphrase, severing his genitals and feeding him to a dog. What up with that?
You know, my job as town council president was to make sure that we use our taxpayer dollars sufficiently. And we tried to do that. Personal feelings aside, that it doesn't matter what my personal feelings are, but my whole job was to make sure that the taxpayer dollars. And when we went through every single contract in East Greenwich, we went back 20 years to look at our fiscal, where we were fiscally, and we had a problem. So, and it's just not sustainable. One of the things that we had brought up in East Greenwich, and I sat down with the union president, was in particular the pension and OPEB system. We were terribly unfunded. In fact,
you and everybody else.
Yeah, in fact, today I looked at the numbers. Last year when I was on the council, I had brought up an $86 million unfunded pension and OPEB liability in East Greenwich, which is pretty high for a small town. We only had 13,000 residents. When I looked at it this morning, we're up to $107 million unfunded pension and OPEB liability. So it's growing. And when that happens, it starts crowding out everything else. So it's not good for anybody in the town, because then you cannot actually buy new fire trucks, new ambulances, new police cars. You can't take care of anything if your fiscal house isn't in order. So for me, it was all about fiscal responsibility. And truly, in years past, they had promised the firefighters, they had promised the teachers, they had promised the police officers that when they retired, this money would be there. We're running into major problems, and it's not just in East Greenwich, it's throughout the state, whether they can fulfill those promises.
No, there's no doubt. There's going to have to be a state solution to this. By the way, OPEB, for those of you who are scoring at home, is other post-employment benefits. It means health insurance for the most part.
Right. So the game has to be changed.
Yeah, so there's been that. There's been some contention over side deals in contracts.
Right. We uncovered, not to interrupt you, sorry. In Warwick, they uncovered 2. We uncovered 10 in East Greenwich. Now, some of them are innocuous. They have no financial impact, but it still didn't follow the process. And the process was that the town council has to approve them. So if the town council neither knows or has any knowledge of them, they no longer exist. So we found 10. And some of them had significant financial implications for the town.
And so you were in a contentious. By the way, the same thing happening in Warwick, and God knows if you take the lid off a lot of the communities in this state, you may find even more. I hope it's not a culture, but we've seen that kind of a thing. What happened specifically with this particular argument, conversation that you had with the firefighter that came from Coventry? I'm trying to figure out if it was your fiscal disposition that had Ms. Fenton crying a river about firefighters, or whether it was the personal stuff that has ended up being part of a litigation.
I don't know. You know, that's something that you'd have to ask her. I don't know.
Did you say those things to that guy?
I don't know what she was referring to, so I can't comment on.
Well, you know what I'm referring to.
So I don't
that
know.
Which Ms. Corrigan reportedly investigated and said it did happen. Are you stipulating to that?
Well, it's an actual litigation right now, so I shouldn't comment on that. You know, so I won't comment on that.
Is it your style?
No.
Was it a one-off moment?
I would say anything that happened in there is in litigation, but anybody that knows me, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to talk to you, and let's come to a compromise. Politics is all about compromise.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about the structure of the party. Stay with us. I really believe that if the Republican Party keeps doing it the same way, it's just banging your head against the wall. I guess it feels better when you stop. You got to figure out a way to rub some sticks together, you know, eke out money from those who want to play ball in the party, meaning Central Committee members, just like Girl Scout cookies. You got a budget to raise, you know, $5,000 if you want to play ball on the committee. Put that money into a hopper, go hire an executive director full-time who then is charged with trying to take that thing to the next level. Because if you keep playing the game like the Democrats do, you don't have the tools, you don't have the labor organization, you don't have the resources, you don't have any of that kind of stuff.
You're absolutely correct. We've got to change the way that we do business or we'll never succeed. So you're right. The idea is to raise enough money to get an executive director in there full time. Because when you have somebody, a paid professional, it has always been my goal to professionalize what we do in the Republican Party.
Whose then exclusive role ought to be for 6 months to keep raising money.
Right.
For what express purpose? Changing the General Assembly? What?
Well, our whole goal in the next 2 years is to get more bodies up at the General Assembly. I have a theme that it's strive for 25 reps and lucky 13 on the Senate side. You can't effectuate change unless you have at least those types of numbers. You have to start growing them.
What's the number about? 25 in the House gives you what?
So 25 in the House, it's actually 26, but I don't have a phrase for 26.
Sustainable veto?
So sustainable veto. So on both sides. So that's what we're really looking to, like, try to start making incremental changes. We have 9 and we have 5. We are such a small voice up there that nobody really has to pay attention to us. We're a super minority party up there. So our whole goal is to make sure that we have bodies up at the General Assembly. How do we do that? We have to get out in the community. We have to have a really good message. We have to raise money, and we have to have some manpower. And manpower is convincing people that this is what we are trying to do.
Are you, as chairperson, going to shop for a really, really powerful gubernatorial candidate in 3 years?
Actually, that's not my focus. My focus is to make sure that the next 2 years we focus exclusively on the General Assembly.
You agree with me that we've had round peg, square hole candidates? You know, Brendan Doherty ran for Congress as a Republican, gubernatorial material, swing and a miss. The former Chief Justice, swing and a miss. Bob Flanders running against Sheldon Whitehouse. Both would have been very viable gubernatorial candidates.
Yeah, and that's a personal decision for them.
Well,
but
no
for
kidding,
me,
but you have to have a role in that, don't you?
Well, my role for the next 2 years, really, Dan, has got to be exclusively getting people in the General Assembly, because that's where, I used to love when Ken Mondacco, when he was running for party chair, would say that's where the sausage is made, up at the General Assembly. That's where change is effectuated in this state. You know, even if somebody, as a Republican candidate, got elected as governor, he didn't have anybody, he or she would not have anybody to back them up. So there was no backup in the General Assembly.
What will the brand be? We have a minute left. What will the brand of the Republican Party be under your chairpersonship?
So for me, it's got to be about finances. We are losing our population here. Our age 21 to 30, they're leaving from other jobs and opportunities. Our seniors are leaving, they're retiring because they can't afford to live here. So it's got to be about what's left in your wallet. How much money is left in your wallet after the government and the Democrats have taxed you out of everything? So there's no money in your wallet. Second thing is the quality of education. Are we actually using our money in K through 12 in the most efficient way? You look at those test scores at 3rd grade, we have students that can't read. They're 3% in Central Falls, 3rd graders can read at grade level. That's atrocious.
Yeah, you're going to have a plan. You know, talking about the tax burden is one thing, but how you're going to appropriate the money that we do raise is where the bread's buttered. You guys have never done that.
Right.
Ever.
Yes.
So, well, good luck.
Thank you very much.
I hope you're as accessible as you've been this week. I know you've been on the media tour.
I have been.
Locally, but we'll reach out plenty of times. So congratulations.
Great. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. The new chairperson of the Republican Party. A unique show tomorrow night. Next. Good luck to the Republicans. They're going to have to restructure, no doubt about it. Now, tomorrow night, the return of Marianne Sorrentino. Every time she writes a good one, we try to bring her in here. You may think this is a good one, you may think it ain't a good one, but it's certainly a lightning rod issue. She wrote about Mr. Kraft's challenges in Florida recently in the Providence Journal, and she'll be here to talk about that. And I'm sure we'll get on to other things, because when Marianne arrives, just kind of let the throttle go a little bit, you know. We'll be right, well, we'll see you tomorrow night, and we'll see you on the radio at 3 on WPRO. Bye.